Welcome to the Spiral of the Rose podcast with our friends Kelli and Bri.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are talking about reflecting on the past year and how we can do that in a more effective way so that we're not just acknowledging the experiences that have happened, but that we're actually learning from them so that we can move forward and grow going forward into the next year. So we can reflect on our situations all the time without really learning from them. We can reflect by, a lot of people keep a journaling practice. They'll journal what happened to them that day, just write it down. And that in and of itself is helpful just in anchoring in memories, in remembering what happened. However, if that's as far as you take it, you lose a lot of learning that can come from that. So when you instead actually sit with what has happened and reflect on it and get really clear on what has happened and dig in a little bit farther, you're able to walk away with a wealth of knowledge and experience that is invaluable. So that's what we want to talk about today. As we're coming up to the end of 2024, it is starting to be the time of year where we want to reflect on what has happened so that we can change our experience going forwards.
Yeah, and I would add to that we are in this season right now where it's a very transitional season. We're in the middle of autumn, but as we head from autumn into winter, it's a very much a time of reflection in itself. And this is coming from personal experiences, but also in me following the wheel of the year and just all of the practices that come with that. This time is typically a slow down period energetically. If you think about our ancestors and before we had all of this technology, before we had all of the media and the hustle and bustle of the world, when they were going into the winter season, they were preparing for it. They were storing things away, food, resources. They knew that it was going to get dark, that it was going to get cold, and that they would need these certain things to help them through the winter. So it wasn't a time to speed up and to bring a bunch of more things into the world, right? It was a time to slow down, and it was a time to reflect, and it was a time to just kind of like realize, what are my priorities going into this? How can I slow down to prepare for the next? Most of it was based on growing seasons, right? Because they grew their own food. How can I prepare for the next growing season so I can support my family, so we can be abundant in this way?
I love that as a metaphor, as an example, because really the prep for the next season is really what it comes down to, right? I mean, yes, we want to set aside our stores for the winter. We want to be prepared for what's ahead, but also they aren't just putting that stuff away. They're also, setting aside seeds from the stuff that they are sowing from the fields, right? They are putting aside all of this stuff so that it is ready for the next season. And that is really what we want to get into here, is not just, they weren't just reflecting as in looking back and like, okay, how did this season go? And just writing that down or commenting on it, right? They're taking that information and they're preparing for the next season with that information. So they're going, we didn't have enough crops this year, maybe, so we want to set aside twice as many seeds as we had, as we set aside last year, or whatever. So that's brilliant. And I also think this really ties in as we come up to the end of the, Western calendar year. I personally, I like to follow the wheel of the year a little bit more closely versus the actual like January 1st New Year. But when people are setting their New Year's resolutions, their goals for the next year, if they do that without reflection first, they're not going to be very effective goals, right? If you look back and you reflect on what happened and why, and what should I change in order to have a different result, you're going to be a whole lot more effective in your goal setting versus if you were to just pull something out of your ass, really. Right? Like you're just picking something because you want a certain result, but you have if you're not looking back at like, well, what got me to where I am right now? That's a space that I don't want to be in. So whether that's, I gained some weight, why? Right? Why did I gain weight? What caused that? So what do I need to change if I want to have a different result? Right? There's, and I mean, just as an example, but I love the idea of like, we're preparing for not just, gathering the last of what is before us, that like tracking what happened piece, but also preparing for what's coming after. So that is why we want to talk about this today. So for me, one of the things that has come out of 2024 for me that has been really huge is that reflection piece, because I've been doing the Suspending Disbelief podcast, which is me stopping at the end of every day and reflecting back. And I will say sometimes my recordings of me reflecting are literally just me listing what happened, and I don't go that deep into it, and we're not actually getting involved. But when I reflect back and then I go, what did that mean? And how, like, what lessons can I take away from that? And what pieces of wisdom or advice do I have to share with my listeners based on what happened in this day? That is entirely more powerful and more effective. And I've been learning and growing at an insane rate this last year because of doing that, because I'm taking that time to look back in a really deep way and get really clear about what happened and why, not just what happened, and what I can do about it from now on so that I have a different experience. And it has led to a year of insane growth for me, in every area of my life, just by doing that. So I think this is a really, really important topic.
Yeah, and I love that we're talking about like end of year reflection right now, because actually like Samhain is the new witch's new year. So this feels perfectly aligned for like me to talk about the end of the year. But for me, like my lesson was that I can be both flowy and structured. That was like the big lesson for me this year. And so it was really breaking past that conception or that preconception that if I was so structured and disciplined that I wouldn't have any free time to like do self-care or do what I want to do or go out for a random walk on a Tuesday or like do all of these things. So really kind of reflecting back on that, like bringing that structure in, actually made me able to do those things even more guilt-free. Yes. And also it very much aligned with all of the seasons and with all of, the energies that come up in the different seasons, because sometimes we don't feel like doing anything. Something might be going on in our lives, or we're going through a difficult period of energetics, or something's going on in the collective, and we just have those days or even a week long or whatever that we just can't get into anything. We just don't want to do anything. And for me, when I had started building the structures, it became easier to handle those instead of feeling that I was failing in some way.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of that balance between structure and flow, right? Is that it just gives you the fall, like the net to fall back on, right? The something that's going to stick around and be stable for you no matter how your energy goes, right? So I think like one of the examples we were talking about before we even hopped on and started recording this episode was a really, really clear one and a really good one for, I think, probably for our audience, since probably a lot of the women listening are entrepreneurs or building a business or, things like that. And that is when we're setting our goals, or when we're calling in something, when we're trying to manifest something. If we stop first and we take the time to look back, we take the time to go, what has been my experience so far? What did I like about it? What did I not like about it? What do I want to let go of? What do I want to bring forward? Right. And clarifying and amplifying, right? So like taking away what doesn't fit perfectly for us and then really amplifying the pieces that do. We are setting our goals, the way to get really clear on what's going to be best for us, because we don't want to just call in any random thing. So we gave a couple examples when we were just talking earlier, and they were really, really good ones. So one was when you're trying to manifest $1 million. Okay, so manifesting $1 million sounds fantastic. Like, yeah, who doesn't want $1 million? But if you don't get clear first, you might manifest $1 million that comes with a hell of a lot of work, right? And you're going to be busting your ass to have that $1 million, to earn that $1 million, and it's going to be a more stressful $1 million, right? Versus if we're manifesting $1 million that comes easily and that we get to enjoy and all of that kind of thing. So instead, having it be something that comes in without all of the effort, right? And so when we're doing this process of reflecting back and clarifying and amplifying what is working and all of that, that helps us in deciding what we're calling in so that we are really clear in what we're putting out into the universe saying, I want this. And the other example that we had come up with was in business, for example, if you're starting out in business and you're like, I want to be making a lot of money. So I decide I want 30 one-on-one clients. And I have 30 hours in a month to work on my business. So that's perfect. It's 1 hour per client. You know, if I just do one call per month with each client for my one-on-one clients. And it's like, great, you have 30 hours to work in your business. You're taking 30 of those hours to have these calls with these people. But what you're not looking at is the prep time that goes into that, the sales time that goes into finding those clients, the, you know, content writing, the follow-ups to those calls, and keeping track of what you did discuss with your clients so that you know what's coming the next time, and all of the different pieces that help a business to run. So all of the work that goes on in the back end is not included in that. So if you call in 30 one-on-one clients and you only have 30 hours to work on your business, you are going to fall on your ass. You are going to fail. And it is going to suck because you will have received payments and then not be able to deliver, and you will have to refund people, and you will get a bad rap, and, you know, all of these kinds of things. So taking that time to get super clear and to acknowledge what the consequences of past situations were so that we really understand what the lesson from it was and we can take it and apply it to the future is just, it's so important. It cannot be undermined whatsoever, right? Like we can't minimize that at all. That is one of the most effective things as far as learning and growing in life, but also in business.
Yeah, and I would also add to that in terms of when you are setting these goals, as a little side note, if you don't have your belief lined up behind making $1 million energetically somewhere, if you're blocking that, it might be at a subconscious level, then no matter how many times you write it down on a piece of paper, it's not going to come to you. Like it's about aligning with, reflecting back, and then seeing what you are energetically available for in terms of your time and effort and everything like that. But also, what are you energetically available to in terms of those clients and that money? Because a lot in the past, I would make these goals and I would write them down on paper, and I would always like wonder, oh, why didn't that happen? Why didn't it come through the way I wanted it to? But then later I would reflect back and go, oh, well, I was still holding on to that scarcity belief that I just released in this energetic session with this other person that we were doing breath work or something, and it came through. And now I know why those goals on paper were not happening.
Well, and even if you were like you call something in. So this is shamanically trying to manifest something that is outside of what you're energetically aligned for at this time. What that does to you is it brings it on a dark night of the soul. Okay, it brings all the trials and tribulations and life falling apart because the universe is like, oh, that's what you want? Are you sure? Right? And so it's like, okay, well, we're going to energetically align you with your goals. And so you end up having things falling away and things falling apart and relationships breaking down and all of the things, right? And as much as like, I feel like sometimes we have to have a dark night of the soul to get to where we want to go. Like, especially if we want to grow and expand quickly, it's kind of going to happen. But if we can prevent that, why wouldn't we? Right? So like calling in something that is more aligned with where you are energetically is not going to result in that painful process of manifesting that into reality. So at least not as much so.
Yeah, I love the shamanic perspective. That's really great because we can set that off. Sometimes I agree though. It just sometimes the dark night is just meant to happen at the timing it's meant to happen. And if you resist it, then it persists, right?
So much worse.
The more you resist it, the more it persists. So just lean into the energies of I need to clear these things out. This is happening for a reason. There's something better on the other side. But I think it ties back into that whole reflection cycle, right? Like what, reflecting on how did I get here? How can I, the next time something like this comes up, how can I be better prepared for it so I'm not in complete chaos in my life? How can I better prepare for knowing that when these up levels happen, things sometimes are going to get out of sorts, but I know that I'm going to get to the other side of it because I always have in the past. So that like reflection piece is really huge, and especially when shit hits the fan and chaos starts happening.
Yeah. And then, I mean, that really is the clarifying process. Also, when we're deciding what we're letting go of, it's really similar to, I mean, like you said, sometimes I think it just does need to be a dark night of the soul. It does need to happen quickly. We're meant to move quickly at that point in our lives or whatever. But when we are reflecting back and looking at it and going, well, that didn't serve me. That wasn't helpful. Like, I'm not going to do that again. It's the same kind of a thing as the things that are falling away when we're going through that process, right? So all that is things that are no longer aligned, that are not serving us, that are not going to bring in the results that we want, are being removed from our lives. And it can feel really crappy in the moment. It can feel like, everybody hates us and we have the worst luck in the world and our car broke down and then our refrigerator set on fire and then we got kicked out of our house. Like, you know what I mean? It can be really, really awful and it can feel terrible, but it's like, it's for a reason. It's bringing in, or it's clearing the way for the new to come in. Right. And it can be quite painful, but the more that we take the time to reflect and to refine and to make the choices deliberately and with intention and with that clarity, instead of just wantonly just being like, I want $1 million, and then having the stuff falling away that will take us to $1 million, it's going to be less extreme, right? So it just feels like it's such an important thing, and it makes life so much easier when we take the time to do that. And a lot of the time in our society these days, we're like, I don't have the time. I can't slow down. I got to keep going. Right. And I think coming into this time of the year as well, like we're coming up into, Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and then Cyber Monday, and then going into Christmas. Like this is a season where people spend a lot of money. And so if you are a business owner, a lot of the time this is like sell, 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 right? Like this is the time to make the sales. And that's great. But I think before that all hits, slow down first. Take the time to make sure that you are calling in what you want. Because, and I mean, I can use this as an example. Last year on Black Friday, I did not prepare any Black Friday sales. I was like, nope, I don't care. I'm not doing it. I don't know why. I don't know what was in my head. I was like, nah, I just don't care. And so I didn't prepare. And then everybody was like, what the hell? We want sales. Like, why are you not selling something? So I was like, you know what? Fine. 50% off site wide for my website. And I was with Podia at the time. Like that's where my website was hosted and all that stuff. And it was not up to snuff. It was not ready for the amount of sales that came in. And so I had to crash and burn and I was having to do it all manually. And I mean, this happened again in August, right? Where I was like, I had an offer a day and my website crashed and burned. And I had to start over again. And I ended up doing it all manually. So really, like, it's a lesson to take away that. And for me, like looking at that is like, okay, I don't want just a random whatever comes in to come in. I do not want to open my calendar. Like tomorrow, I have 7.5 hours of calls on my schedule. That is too much for me. I don't like that, right? Like that is more than I energetically want. So if I had looked at that ahead and not opened my calendar beyond my means, right? Not said like, okay, I'm wide open for it all to come in, then it all wouldn't have come in. And even though like the sales are nice, the after effects and the delivery are a lot harder because of it. So and that was the same last Black Friday for me. So it really is just like that super, super clear. And I've been personally getting messages of like, pause, reflect, review, take a look, Bri, before this happens. And it's because, right, Black Friday is coming up. And I know that people are just gearing up to buy. And it's like, okay, but what do I actually want?
Yeah.
And what's it going to come with? Because it always comes with work that's tied to it, right? And I need to review first and decide what that's going to look like for me and what kind of work I'm going to be available to do going forward after that point, right? And it's been really frustrating for me the last couple of months where like I made all these sales and it's great and I'm like, awesome. My calendar's full, all of this, but I still have my youngest at home with me most of each day. Like she's gone for a couple of hours to pre-K. And for me to have 7.5 hours of calls when she's only gone for a couple of hours means that I'm on the phone a lot or I'm on Zoom a lot while she's home, which means she's just sitting in front of a screen trying to be quiet and not interrupt mama, right? And that's not the life that I want with my kids. That's not how I've designed my life around being home with my children and being able to be present with them. So
yeah, I have one kid that's at school all day and I don't even want 7.5 hours of calls. So
no. Oh, like it just isn't, it just doesn't fit, right? And I loved that, like you sent me earlier today this message that you got from a card pull you were doing for yourself, and it was very related to this, right? Where it was like you've picked up I think it was like the 10 of Wands or whatever, right? So you've picked up all these sticks, all 10 sticks, and now you have this really heavy load. And you didn't expect what came with it, right? Yeah, you were calling all of this in, but you didn't expect the weight of that when it came in. And it's like, yeah. Like, it's actually almost surprising to me to think like we can really plan that ahead and not have it be so heavy afterwards, like, and that's funny just because I am more the structured type most of the time, but I guess I've never looked at it in that exact way before. More recent.
Yeah, and I would also add too, like reflecting on that, a big piece of it, I think, for a lot of people, especially when they're first starting out as an entrepreneur, as doing your own thing, as making money, you feel almost obligated to take every sale, every client that comes in, every single thing, because you feel scarcity around it and you feel, oh, well, they want to work with me. I have to sign them, right? I have to do this. I have to do this because there's not going to be another one, or I don't know when there's going to be another one. There's always like that sense of scarcity. And it happens to everybody that's an entrepreneur, no matter who you are, but then add on all those layers of the family generational history of scarcity, like what was happening in your family's history, you know, how was their money situation, add in all those other layers of those things, and then
and collective ones like recessions
and collective, and then it gets very complex all of a sudden. And so it's not just, you know, accepting, oh, if I skip this client, another one will come along. It's like way more complex than that. And there's all this stuff to sort through all of the time. So it's like reflecting on that as well, and just kind of realizing, you know, what are my beliefs around this? Am I believing that if I pass over this opportunity, another one's never going to come along? Or am I believing like, no, it'll be okay if I pass this over. It's just not aligned right now, but a more aligned thing is going to come along.
Yeah. Well, and I think these are all really easy to identify with for me as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, right? And I know that a lot of our audience probably includes people who are those same things, but not all of them. So you also shared an example before we started today that I think would probably apply to most people a little bit more broadly, which is your beliefs around like division and unity and all of that. So I think that would probably be a really great one to wrap this up with.
Yeah.
So that, you know, we're applying sort of all the situations, not just entrepreneurial ones, because those are the ones I identify with most, but not everybody.
Yeah, so this has come up for me a ton in the past week with everything going on in the United States right now. And not to get into anything political, I don't want to get into political stuff. But for me, what has been coming through and what I'm really reflecting on is how much I've grown in a spiritual and personal journey, to where like even 4 years ago, I was still sort of stuck in this kind of like me versus them mindset, us versus them mindset. And there was just like a clear divide between beliefs, right? And anybody who had like, you know, an opposite, and for me it was more extremism, like an opposite extreme belief, then I was like, oh no, you know, I can't talk to you, you're not in my circle, I can't do this, you can't be friends with you, etc. And because that was very much what was being fed into the climate and the collective and my circles and family and friends, you know, that was what I was used to. But as I started going through awakening, my spiritual journey, discovering all these practices, coming to my own conclusions, but really the biggest thing was leaning into my own intuition and discernment of what is right for me, not what everyone else is doing around me, but what is really truly deeply right for me as a soul, as a person. And when I started doing that, and let me tell you, it took years to get to this point, right? It doesn't happen overnight that someone just completely changes how they're looking at the world. It takes years. It takes years of situations happening that you're evaluating, that you're going back and reflecting on. It takes, you know, family situations popping up. It takes things happening in your life. It takes you getting opportunities, losing opportunities, just going through everything in your life to get to a point where I am now, where I'm looking at the division that's happening around me in the world, and I'm sitting here going, I am no longer available for this division. I am no longer energetically aligned to be in this fight that you guys are around me. And I'm not writing you off. I am sending you love. I'm sending you unconditional love. But I am not aligned to that division anymore. So it's like reflecting back on the past 4 years. How did I get to this point where I can say that? Where I can say I'm not aligned for division. I'm only aligned for unity, for unconditional love. And as a caveat too, like some people will come and attack you and say, well, you're just like you're ignoring everything that's going on in the world. You're just like bypassing, your spiritual bypassing, but that's not what this is at all. It is just declaring that you're not available for those low vibrations that people are getting stuck in, because it's not doing anything to move the world forward, being stuck in those vibrations.
Yeah. Well, and I think like, here's where it all comes in, right? And for me yesterday, for example, and we're talking like, we're a couple days after the election in the US here right now when we're recording this. I was speaking to clients from both sides of the board, right? I had clients from both sides, both leanings, and I had nothing but love for either side. Like there was no, it doesn't matter. And I'm not even from the US, but even if I was, like, it doesn't matter who you voted for. What matters is who you are as a person. And the people who I have now, like, okay, yes, I overloaded my calendar, but I have now over the years developed a process of discrimination and discernment where I am not just letting any client come in. And the clients that I have, I just adore. They are all incredible people. And it doesn't matter who they voted for, they're incredible people. Right. And it's like, and it's that same thing. And looking at, I mean, from a unity standpoint, like, yes, we want that unity, but for this podcast standpoint, like that, the divine feminine is more accepting and more open to all. Do you know what I mean? It's very like, it's the mother figure. It's the, I love you no matter what. It's the unconditional love. Right. And that is what we're trying to bring more of into the world so that it can balance out the other side of things. Right. And so, yeah, I thought that was a really beautiful example also. And just as like sort of a last note, you were talking about like back at the beginning of the episode, you were talking about the wheel of the year, how and like how we're coming, it was just Samhain, which is the witchy new year, like you said. And for anyone who is not like, who wouldn't say that they're witchy, I mean, it's also the pagan new year. It's also the, right, like it's just sort of that different calendar than we're used to in Western culture, right? So it actually makes more sense energetically following the wheel of the year, which is also the wheel of the goddess, right? So divine feminine, so that we are energetically aligned with the seasons. So as fall comes to a close and we get into winter, we are coming into, like you said, that reflective mode and that gathering and harvesting and preparing for the coming cold season, the dark season, and even beyond that into the spring, making sure that we have those seeds set aside, making sure that we have all of that. So energetically, the wheel of the year makes a whole hell of a lot more sense. So I'm not necessarily witchy per se, although I mean, like the more that I know you and the more that like the witchiness and the shamanic stuff, like it all ties in really closely anyways, right? But
it's just very much rooted in nature, and that's I am so rooted in nature, consider myself, that's the main part of my practice, is that nature practice.
Yeah. And with that, I mean, like it applies to everything as women, right? We have energetic cycles each month and they tie in with the cycles, the seasons as well. So we have a releasing and then a calling in, and like it all goes in a circle and it's the same thing. So the wheel of the year really follows that. And it all just is really logical to me. Actually, the last episode of season 1 of the Heartbeats Harbor podcast, I talked about that. And that episode has so many freaking listens. It's unreal. Like so many people have listened to that episode. And it's just because they tied in like the monthly calendar, the yearly calendar, women's cycles, like all of that stuff. I was talking about all of that. And this year is probably the first time where I've chosen like, nope, I'm not doing New Year's at New Year's. I'm doing New Year's now. I'm doing like, this is when I am reflecting back on the entire last year and when I'm setting my goals for the next full cycle, right? And not calendar year, not Western calendar year, but wheel of the year, right? And choosing to align with that, which has really come in for me extra strongly this last year, has been so much more energetically aligned and feels really good. Like as I'm doing it, it's like there's so much less resistance.
Yeah.
So much less like pushing energy than when you're trying to do your spring intention type stuff at New Year's dead winter, right? It just is like, it doesn't quite fit. So, so I think this is a really good, whether you choose to celebrate New Year's on or like December 31st, January 1st, or whether you decide to follow the wheel of the year, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is, I think personally, taking the time to reflect following these energetic cycles, right? So each month during our hormone cycles, there is a point of slowing down to reflect, and that comes in right before and during our period. And I mean, this is something that I learned from Caitlin Signorelli, right? She's my like hormone cycle go-to guru. But we have that then, and it's the same as this point now, where we're in the fall going into the winter, and we are about to slow down and rest and be more inward and be more reflective and all of that. So at this time, whether you're doing it in prep for January 1st or whether you're doing it for right now, I think right now is the perfect time for all of us to slow down and take the time and look at what has happened for us over the last 12 months. What can we take away from that? What can we learn from it? And then, like, where do we go from here, right? What can we change in our planning going forward? What can we let go of so that we don't have to have it forced from us in a dark night of the soul? What can we choose to let go of now that is really not in alignment, and get radically responsible with ourselves and radically honest with ourselves and just go, yeah, that's not really serving me. And as hard as it is to let go, I'm going to, because I know that if I don't choose it, it's going to be forced on me eventually. Right. So, to me,
I love
now
all
is
that.
the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I would just add onto that really quickly before we sign out that it is a great time right now, because soon, if you're someone who does follow the holidays, it's going to get very busy, and there's going to be lots of activities, and there's going to be lots of demands on your time, which that could be a whole nother episode of boundaries with that stuff. But
Yeah.
before all that happens, and before, like kids are home for a couple weeks and stuff like that, this is really a great time to focus on yourself. Like
Yeah.
November is such a great self-care reflection, going inward, listening to my intuition. What do I really need right now to set myself up to feel good in the next couple of months?
Yeah. And even set ourselves up for, like, what are we going to manifest at the new year? If you want to manifest at the new year, you want to set goals at the new year, setting yourself up for it now doesn't prevent you from doing it then. It just has it so that you're not coming up with something at the spur of the moment with no planning involved, right? Because you spent all of the holidays in that crazy energy and not having time to reflect. So yeah, getting that out of the way sort of right now, taking the time for that is going to, I mean, not only like if you're clarifying, if you're letting things go at this point when you're reflecting, you're going to go into the holiday season with less insanity because you've let go of some things that no longer are needed, or because you've chosen, to hold those boundaries, or to say like, no, I'm not going to say yes to every invitation over the holidays, or I'm not going to, because that, going and seeing those people is not something that I actually want to do, or, whatever. So taking the time now, it just is like, actually for me, really quick last example, but like during my hormone cycle throughout the month is I get so crazy, like with the timing of, okay, so we always want to like call in the new at the new moon, right? But for me, that's like my intense, busy, like I'm go, go, go. Like that's not my time for that. So every time now I prepare and I decide what my intentions are going to be at the new moon like a week before, because that's when my energy is there for that. And then I'm like, by the time it comes in, I'm not having to make that decision in my crazy, and it's done. Right. So similar idea is just doing this a little bit ahead of time. And leaning into doing it during the right kind of energy and during the slower periods, so that we are freed up to just enjoy those crazy times and still be prepared for the planning and goal setting and intention setting and all of that good stuff after all the craziness. So
yeah, I love that. Yeah, always listen to your body and your intuition. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
I think this is a great time to reflect. And also, just astrologically speaking, there was a lot of crazy energies astrologically lately, and sometimes that can feel disorienting. So slowing down to reflect on that is also a really good practice too. A lot of just kind of reflecting on, well, what are these specific energies coming through for me? How are they manifesting? How can I feel better moving forward? As I know, there's like a Mercury retrograde coming up also shortly, like right before the holidays. So all of these,
and actually a Mars retrograde over the holidays, right? So, and that one's going to be really crazy, going to be really intense. So definitely do anything that you can at this time to prepare for all the craziness that is coming, right? It's so hard to slow down in our busy lives, but taking the time to slow down is going to really make a difference for you going into the next few months. So,
and that's one thing that I really realized in learning a lot more about astrology and about the energies, and you can let them rule your life, or you can kind of prepare and know what's coming ahead. And I like to be the person who prepares and knows, not that I'm blaming Mercury retrograde on everything that happens to me.
It's
but
tempting though.
it's tempting. I can prepare myself best to know maybe I shouldn't book so many technology things during Mercury retrograde, because I know that technology mess ups happen during Mercury retrograde. So maybe don't do all those Zoom calls and webinars like in the height of Mercury retrograde. Or if you have to, make sure you're prepping enough that you test it and you're following through with everything.
And giving yourself extra time and, all of that. Yep.
But yeah, and that ties back to the reflection piece. Like, how can we reflect back on those periods that happened in the past when these energies happened? And how can we move forward better, knowing, what happened in the past?
Well, yeah, exactly. You can have every single Mercury retrograde knock you on your ass, or you can be prepared next time. Right. So it's really just learning from past, you could call it mistakes or failures or whatever, but really they're all just learning experiences, but choosing to learn from them instead of repeating the same thing again and again, suffering, being in misery, right? We can choose to have it be better. So I love that. I really hope that everyone going into the end of the year here, going into the next few months, the end of the calendar year and the beginning of the next calendar year, take the time, just reflect, it is so worth slowing down for a little bit, to have a really successful period over the next few months. And if you're in business and you're like, I need sales right now. Well, you're not going to have sales over the next few months if you don't slow down now. I'm warning you. So just take the time. And it really doesn't have to take that long. I think that's the other thing, is sometimes we feel like, if I slow down, it's just going to be like, I'm going to be stuck in that slowdown forever. It really doesn't have to take that long. Just take the time, take as long as it takes, but I promise you it won't be as long as it feels like it will be once you actually get into it. Right. So yeah, so thank you all for listening today, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like it and subscribe. And if you really loved it, we would love a 5-star review, which helps us reach more people with our message. Comment your thoughts on the episode below, or if you have any questions you'd like us to answer in a future episode. Talk to you next time.